That they were doing it before. The Brits were doing this before World War One. They were using the print media in the same fashion, and I point to 1885 as a key point. It's quite interesting. There's a historian, Carol Quigley, you're probably familiar with.
Okay, yeah.
He wrote two noteworthy books, Tragedy and Hope, and then The Evolution of Civilizations, which is quite an interesting book because it describes the energetics of how things work. And it's like, between the two of them, I came to an understanding of capitalism. He caused me to understand capitalism differently than I understood it before, which is like, people talk about capitalism and they denigrate it a lot. And it's like, well, he divides it up into various phases. So the first phase of capitalism is market capitalism, which is like, we just start using money again in the West, and it's been 700 years like that. And it's like, okay, so then he divides up finance capitalism, which is the creation of markets for corporations that are publicly traded. Mm-hmm. So now you can create enterprises that are much greater than any individual set of investors could possibly ever make, which is railroads and stuff like that, big dams. And finally, monopoly capitalism. And he distinguishes between these two, but finance capitalism and monopoly capitalism is like, finance capitalism is characterized by seeking to lower costs to raise profits. And monopoly capitalism is to seeking to raise prices to raise profits. And yeah. J.D. Rockefeller famously said it well. He said, competition is a sin. And it's like, and I regard he regarded 1931 as the time that monopoly capitalism took over. And I regard it as 1885. And 1885, I pick 1885 because, hang on, I'm having a problem with managing other affairs here. 1885 was when Nathan Rothschild was made to be a baron by Queen Victoria, which is she was anti-Semitic, and she created a Jewish peer of the realm because he was so instrumental in the affairs of the British Empire with the finance. And it was like, as soon as you introduce him as a recognized member of the gang, it is like, yeah, the finance is that important, kids. And it's like, yeah, and what happened was in 1881, the Brits had the first Boer War, which they lost because they were playing by imperial rules that were like chivalrous in dealing with another Christian nation. And then what happened was in 1889, they went and went full barbarian on the Boers and won, and they created prison. It was concentration camps and killing children and women in concentration camps and exporting the men off the place, to other prisons. And so it was unethical. And so the ethics changed markedly. And I'm like, that was the moment of the introduction of monopoly capitalism in the affairs of the British Empire. They sold out.
Interesting. That actually makes a lot of sense. This is part of the problem with my studies, is that I need to start studying deeper into European history, because I've been mostly teaching American history, and it doesn't really allow me to you take in all of this stuff that was happening on the other side of the world, and it's actually really important.
It is, and it's like, so that was kind of interesting for me because I was studying American history, and it was like, I started studying, and I was interested the period after about starting the 20th century, and it was the conspiratorial stuff, and it was work that came out in the 50s with the what's the name of the there was congressional committees that were hearing the stories about the un-American activities of the tax exempt foundations, right?
Mm.
And it's like that work with Norman Dodd was the chief investigator, and it's just pivotal work. And they found out all this stuff, and it's he had a and I try to recall the lady's name. She was a lawyer. She went to New York to they allowed them to witness the books of the notes of the meetings of the board of trustees of the Carnegie Endowment. Okay, and it's like they let them look at the books for 2 weeks. They let her look at the books, and she looked at the books and wrote and took very carefully targeted elements she was supposed to look at. She's taking notes of this, and she brings the notes back, and she can never practice law again because she went mad from what she learned. And she's like, what does that mean, went mad? It's like you learn something and it caused you to go mad and not be able to practice law. And it's like she was that angry is what it means. Because It's like what she learned was maddening, which is she found evidence that the Carnegie Foundation spent 1 year investigating, is there a way, in a scholarly fashion, is there a way more effective than war to dramatically alter the course of a nation's life? And then after 1 year, they said, nope. Okay, for the next year, how do we get the United States in a war? And this is about 1910. And then they said, oh, we must control the State Department. And so they set about controlling the State Department. And it's like all documented in there. And it's like this, it's like, so that he brings all this stuff back to the Congress. And then they clamped that down hard, the investigation. And it was the Reese Committee is what it was. And it's like, this was in 1950. And it was, they were on it in 1950. And it's like, this stuff is just been well canned, like controlled narrative, which is the teaching of history is well controlled. And it's like, so my dad, well, he can't even begin to hear me talk about this stuff, man. It's like, wow. And I'm like, okay, I respect that. And it's like, you know, I like, but I had to allow myself to do it. Do you know what I mean? To study it. But it's like, it's just forbidden topics, right?
Well, yeah, for historians, I mean, if you can't prove it, then they're just like, I'm just going to completely dismiss it, even though there's a bunch of like tangential evidence like that points, like every single data point points to what you're saying is being true, and then they're like, well, there's no actual evidence for it, so we can't talk about it.
That's it. And it's like, well, what's funny, I had this conversation with my dad, which was funny because I didn't expect him to agree with the premise. I said, you know, it occurs to me that if you think that what I'm talking about is a conspiracy theory, it matters not how much evidence I bring to bear. Is that correct? And he said, he agreed with that. And I was like, just about fell off the table, man. I'm like, whoa, man, I can't believe you agreed to that. That's okay. And so it's, you know, you're end up in a peculiar position because it's like, no, we're not gonna even entertain that conversation in the least place. So now how can I talk to you about things that are, you know what I mean? Because you've separated yourself from reality in some sense because you're not admitting certain evidence or certain conversational topics even, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's like the weird problem of this time period, right? Is that we have so many like pieces of data that are just jumping out of the woodworks because now we can record it digitally and it can be all in one place and then someone can categorize it, that we tend to like just fall over ourselves just because we're just like, well, we don't have enough data, but
well, no, it's a bitch because it's like here we are, we're I'm trying to draw you a picture here because I'm like, I've got a little image that makes sense of this process, which is what has occurred. okay? And it's like this source of information. There's a source of information right there, okay? And it's like this, it's like the source of information is going to inform variously, okay? So the source of information, in this case, is a central broadcasting system. So the central source broadcasts down into the population, okay? And it's like, that's the model that was the 20th century liberalism was built upon, right? It's like we centralize the data, and it's too hard for everybody to get the information, and we broadcast it out, which is like it was newspapers before. But what has occurred here is this, okay? Now we gather information diversely, and then we broadcast it into the sort of memosphere, whatever you want to call it, right? The social environment, and then we compare notes. And it's like, this system is poor because this system is like the reversed polarity, right? This system is failing, and this system is gaining traction at the moment. And it's like, the issue is the top-down thing is lacks appropriate, it doesn't have appropriate pixelation. It doesn't
resolution rate.
The resolution is poor because it's like, if there's no competing information sources, it makes enough sense that I'm not going to bitch too much, okay? But it's like, dude, when I'm looking at the internet and your stuff makes no sense, it's like, I'm calling bullshit, man. And I'm like, we're not having it, okay?